International news live from Moscow. This is RT with me, Yulia Shapovalova. Thanks for joining us. Voting on a strike against Syria can wait, but the threat of military action should remain. After weeks of belligerent rhetoric, the US president has agreed to give diplomacy a chance following Russia's proposal to put Syria's chemical weapons under international control. Barack Obama made the comments in an address to a nation which, according to recent polls, is mostly against engaging in a new war. RT's Gaynet Chakan reports now from Washington.
We saw President Obama engaged in verbal acrobatics with a message that many Americans will find very confusing. He was forcefully pushing the idea that strikes against Syria are necessary, asking the American people to support him. At the same time, he was saying maybe they will not be necessary and maybe diplomacy can work. He was referring to Russia's proposal for Syria to give up its chemical weapons. Take a listen.
It's too early to tell whether this offer will succeed, and any agreement must verify that the Assad regime keeps its commitments. But this initiative has the potential to remove the threat of chemical weapons without the use of force, particularly because Russia is one of Assad's strongest allies. I have therefore asked the leaders of Congress to postpone a vote to authorize the use of force while we pursue this diplomatic path.
The spin that President Obama is now putting on Russia's proposal is that a diplomatic solution only came because he threatened force. But as much as the U.S. president is now trying to capitalize on that line of thought, it's important to remember what preceded this proposal. President Obama was facing Congress that was most likely to vote no on his war initiative because American people overwhelmingly oppose military action against Syria, and they've bombarded their representatives with calls demanding that they vote no. So he had Congress, the American people, against him on that. The EU was not going along. The UN has been against such unilateral action. Given all this, many saw this diplomatic opening as a life raft, if you will, for President Obama, who with his military threats has basically boxed himself into a corner. We heard calls to strip him of the Nobel Peace Prize for not showing enough initiative to find a diplomatic solution. Well, now the administration is saying Secretary Kerry's dismissive remark on Monday, which Russia picked up on, was not really a rhetorical gaffe and that there was a strategy behind it. Yeah, by the way, here's more about the strategy.
I've spoken to the leaders of two of our closest allies, France and the United Kingdom, and we will work together in consultation with Russia and China to put forward a resolution at the UN Security Council requiring Assad to give up his chemical weapons and to ultimately destroy them under international control. We'll also give UN inspectors the opportunity to report their findings about what happened on August 21st.
It was interesting to hear President Obama talk about the UN and inspectors, considering that his administration was largely dismissive of the UN effort, all the way trying to discredit the work of UN inspectors and refusing to show the UN Security Council the classified evidence that Washington says it has against the Assad government. But it looks like the future of this resolution, of this proposal, will be about who the judgment on whether or not the proposal is working will belong to. Is it going to be the U.S., which has a track record of jumping to bombs as a first option, or the international community, which has a real interest in resolving the crisis in Syria and making sure that the weapons are not used again?
Despite the international community embracing the chance to end the diplomatic standoff over Syria, Russia says its disarmament proposal will work only if war plans are scrapped altogether. RT's Anissa now has more now on The View from Moscow.
Syria has agreed to give up its chemical weapons. This is a game changer. It's a way out for the U.S. and also a chance for diplomacy in the Syrian crisis, something that seemed almost impossible just a week ago. But according to Russia, in order for it to work, the threat of force needs to be taken off the table.
We've heard a positive reaction from Syria to the chemical weapons destruction offer. We're now hoping that our Syrian colleagues will make a responsible decision to put their stockpiles under control, agree to destroy them, and join the Chemical Weapons Non-Proliferation Treaty. No doubt it can only work if we get the U.S. and its allies to agree not to use force.
Clearly, this option is being taken very seriously by the U.S. It was first discussed by Putin and Obama and will now move forward this week between Sergei Lavrov and John Kerry.
We did talk about this issue at the G20 summit, and we agreed that we'll work in that direction and we'll have the Secretary of State and Russian Foreign Minister to try and move this forward.
It's up to top diplomats now to try to move this proposal forward this week, what many see as a last chance for a step towards peace in the Syrian conflict.
Meanwhile, talks on the proposed removal of Syria's chemical weapons have begun among UN Security Council members, and they are proving to be a tense affair. Russia has rejected attempts to put forward a resolution under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which implies the use of force for non-compliance. Historian and Middle East expert Mark Armand believes even if the UN Security Council agrees on the resolution, it will be difficult to implement because of the Syrian opposition's actions.
It is possible that the Syrian government's assets could be conveyed relatively risk-free into the hands of an international commission, though, of course, with a civil war that is not going to be easy. The question is, what about those assets that may have been territory that is either controlled by the rebels or chemical weapons that the rebels could intercept as they're being moved? And so it's very difficult to see that the rebels have an interest in this resolution. Clearly, one thing that unites the disparate rebel groups is they hope that American bombing would weaken Assad and make their chances of coming to power stronger. So the rebels have no great interest in a successful outcome to this, even if, in practice, it might be in the interests of all the members of the Security Council to come to some resolution of this issue, which saves everybody's face, enables everybody to claim to be a peacemaker, and could put this at least complicated part and potentially very dangerous part of the Syrian equation out of service.
And of course, we are interested in what you think about the stories we're covering here on RT. So you can go to our website, rt.com, and have your say about possible outcome Syria's chemical disarmament. So far, the majority of our viewers and readers think removing chemical weapons will only postpone the US and its allies' plans to attack. Roughly 18% of you are convinced the civil war will continue, but without chemical weapons. Just 1% less say the move won't prevent the further use of illegal agents in Syria, as some may remain unaccounted for. And only a handful of you think the Syrian government and its opponents will engage in peace negotiations. So you can go to rt.com and cast your vote there. Washington has started to supply rebels in Syria with lethal arms, according to the opposition. That's as a UN report accuses government forces and opposition fighters of carrying out war crimes, including executions, hostage-taking and the shelling of civilian neighborhoods. A significant part of the rebel forces are extremists who came from abroad to fight the Assad regime. RT's Maria Finoshna investigates now what's making Syria a jihadist battlefield.
This may look like an ordinary farewell amongst friends, but the man in the long Islamic coat is a suicide bomber, leaving on his final journey. This is his last conversation with his elder brother, in a car that is supposed to take him to the walls of the central prison in Aleppo, Syria, and then explode, sending him to paradise, according to his beliefs. These clips were found on a laptop taken from one of the men seen in the footage, who is now in a Syrian prison. He calls himself Raushan and says he came to Syria from a former Soviet republic to fight.
A group called Murad approached me a year ago and convinced me that Muslims in Syria are being oppressed and killed, and that I should go and take up arms against Assad for world jihad and help establish a caliphate that will extend worldwide to Europe, America, and everywhere.
He sneaked into Syria last January through Turkey. In Istanbul, two men who said they were from al-Qaeda met him and accompanied him to Syria, where he joined a large bombing brigade run by an Egyptian jihadist.
My job was mainly to prepare bombs for cars. There were many people, all from different countries. Our teachers showed us how to make bombs, which ingredients to use, and how exactly to cook it.
One of his recent assignments was an Aleppo prison bombing last May. The man you saw in the farewell video was driving the car that Raushan prepared. Raushan brought his entire family to Syria, including his 5-year-old son. On this video, the militant shows his boy how to make a bomb. They say after a father dies, the son should continue the jihad.
I don't know what Allah prepared for me, but we have to finish what we started.
We spoke to Raushan at the Air Force Intelligence Jail next to a military airport in Damascus.
These are the cells. Can we open?
The prisoners here are mainly charged with either terrorism or spying. This newly built unit can accommodate up to 200 people, and already it's almost full. In the jail's backyard, an officer tells us not to get too close, as the prisoners could be dangerous. There are people here from Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt and Palestine, but many came from Europe as well. Algerian with a French passport, Amer has spent most of his life in France, where he married a French woman and lived a normal life. That changed after he was recruited by an Islamic group with al-Qaeda ties, calling for jihad in Syria.
I volunteered. I went to Turkey. In a refugee camp there, I met a Salafi group, and I trained with them for about 2.5 months. And then we illegally crossed the border into Syria.
Amer says, as a Salafi, a fundamental Muslim, he had to get involved.
I saw my Sunni Syrian brothers suffering here. I saw on Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, and other channels that kids are also suffering. I took up arms and I was ready to use them, but when I came here, I didn't see the enemy.
In a separate building, they show us weapons, including handmade bombs and grenades seized from militants. These are the instruments of global jihad that chose Syria as a battlefield to bring foreign fighters and violence. This prison may be full, but beyond the walls, many men with many causes remain free to continue their fight. Marie Finoshna, RT, Damascus, Syria.
And over the past week, Maria Finoshna has also been reporting on the rebels' fight for the ancient Christian village of Malula, not far from Damascus. And in her latest Twitter post, she says the settlement, which is home to some of the world's oldest sanctuaries, has reportedly been taken from al-Qaeda-linked forces by government forces. Maria is on her way to Malula now. Check her Twitter feed and our website for the latest updates. And we'll be back after a very short break with more news.